Hello everybody, and welcome to the 7th part of What If Naruto Was Neglected by His Family and Trained by Tobirama. I hope you enjoy this What If. Also, if you want part 8, like, comment and subscribe to the channel. Naruto Tobirama's heir. Time skip 1 week later. Konohagakure no Sato. Uzumaki Namikaze households. The weather in Konoha was a lot different this fine morning from what the villagers were usually accustomed to. The whole village was covered with gray clouds, lightning crackled in the air with enough intensity to make a few light-hearted people scared out of their wits. This was the case in a room in our favorite household. Naruto felt something grab him by his waist quite forcefully and couldn't help but wince from the death grip. He opened his eyes to see an all-too-familiar mop of red hair and the trembling form of his baby sister. He smiled a little and wrapped her up in a warm loving hug, running his fingers through her hair. "Mito is still scared of lightning, huh?" he asked playfully in a whisper, making her look at him heatedly. Her violet orbs tried to burn holes through his head when another burst of lightning came from the window and she was curled up against him again. "Naru," she squeaked out with a soft sniffle, making him smile and kiss her head gently. "Hi," he asked, making her teary violet eyes gaze into his calm blue ones. "Why aren't you scared of lightning?" she asked with yet another sniffle. He chuckled and rubbed her cheek like always, making her look at him innocently. "Now what kind of a big brother would I be if I am scared of a little loud sound? Anyways, I kinda like this weather," he said, making her smile. In her eyes, her brother wasn't scared of anything as far as she could remember. She could always go to him for any problem and he would be there, just like that. "Naru, I'm scared," she whispered in his neck with a small sniff. He just held her close and nuzzled his cheek against hers, making her giggle happily. "Of what?" he asked in his soft, calm tone. "Today we are going to have all parents at the academy for showcasing our abilities." She sniffled, making him nod. He already knew that. "What if I don't do good?" she whispered, making him chuckle. She glared at him when he just smiled back. "And what's the real reason?" he asked, gently brushing her hair out of her face. She averted her eyes in embarrassment as he saw right through her like always. "I don't want you and Menma to fight," she whispered. Now he was in a loop. What was she talking about? He mused but heard her out silently. "He doesn't like you very much, Naru," she whispered sadly, making him frown. He cupped her cheeks and made her look into his eyes. "What do you mean, Mito?" "Speak clearly," he stated in a firm tone, making her bite her lip nervously. She had to get it out now. "Menma, when he sees you, it's like he's. She stuttered nervously. Naruto squeezed her cheeks for reassurance and looked at her warmly. "He's what, Mito?" he asked in a warm tone, making her smile. "Jealous," she said finally, making him quite confused. Now he was in for a loop. Shouldn't it be the other way around? "Jealous? Of me?" "Mito, I think you're looking too much into it," he said, getting a shake of the head from his sister. "No, Naru, you're so good at everything you do. Even when Ka-chan decided to stall your training, you trained yourself before finding Tobirama-sama. And he took you on as an apprentice. You should hear how much Ka-chan is proud of you. She's always said how big of an honor it is to be trained by him personally," she said, making him nod slightly. He could see her point in that. But not that it still made any sense to him. "But you and Menma get trained by Ka-chan, not to mention Pervy Sage. I mean, he is one of the 3 legendary Sannin, right? Strong enough to rival even the Hokage. The man trained our father, Mito," he said, running his fingers over her cheek while she sat silently taking it all in. "Naru, can you do something for me?" she asked timidly, making him nod instantly. "Anything, Mito, you're my baby sister. Just say it," he said, making her smile softly. "If you and Menma have to fight, please let him win," she asked pleadingly, making him stunned. "You mean let him win?" he asked incredulously, getting a nod from the bubbly girl. He was about to say no when he saw her on the verge of crying. He sighed, running his hand through his hair in frustration. This went against all his rules, but maybe just this once he could promise her if it made her fears wash away. "All right," he said in defeat, making her perk up. "If it comes down to me fighting him, he'll win. But just this once, all right?" He couldn't finish because a red blur had already barreled into his chest. He chuckled at the happy girl in his arms and tried to pry her off, but to no avail. After a few minutes of fighting and barreling, Mito dozed off. Naruto tucked her in his bed and kissed her head before walking out. He had to go and visit his brother before he went to the academy today. He walked out of the confines of his home, the rain still pouring heavily. His clothes were drenched and his hair dripping with raindrops. Those calm cerulean blue eyes gazed ahead while his feet took their time in reaching his destination. A small sad smile lit up his face as he saw the destination he was looking for come into view. Uchiha Memorial Grounds. Naruto walked through the several headstones to the one he wanted to visit. He stood in front of the one he was looking for with his hands tucked in his pockets. He couldn't help but think that Sasuke should have been here today to see his progress at the academy. "You come here often?" a voice suddenly asked, making Naruto glance back a bit to see an equally drenched Sasuke there with a somber look on his face, unlike his stoic mask he tried to put on every day. "Yeah, I do. What about you?" he asked, though already knowing the answer. "Every day, it's where my family is. I have to come every day," he said simply, and the blonde nodded. They stood side by side enjoying the drizzle over them. "Namikaze," the raven suddenly asked, making Naruto hum a little to show he was listening. "Fight me," he stated simply, making the blonde's eyebrow to rise. He saw the hard look on Sasuke's face and said nothing as the raven-haired boy started walking. He followed suit. If he wanted a fight, then who was he to say no to the boy? He himself wanted to cut loose a bit today too. Sasuke was the only one who came close to matching him in a fight. Both had mutual respect for each other's skills. He kept walking through the forests into some unknown clearing in the middle of nowhere when he saw the boy turn to him and nod. He looked around at the abandoned clearing and nodded back as both slid into their respective taijutsu stances. Sasuke was the one to make the first move. He launched forward and pumped his fist back, launching it for the blonde's nose. Naruto caught it easily in his palm and winced at the brute force the punch had in it. He tried to punch him in himself, but Sasuke caught it too as both stared each other down while trying to overpower the other. Naruto knew he was the one who would lose in terms of strength, so he decided to change the tables a bit to his liking. He twisted his body while still in Sasuke's grip. Sasuke's eyes widened in shock as the blonde moved almost as if they were dancing and was about to get him in a hold by his neck. He crouched down and let him go, while rolling away to get some distance. He let out a growl as he saw the blonde smirking from his retreat, but couldn't help but let out a smirk himself. "Can't keep up with my strength, Namikaze," he taunted, doing nothing to the smirking blonde but to amuse him even more. "You talk too much, Uchiha," he shouted, jumping high up in the sky and launched a flurry of shurikens over the unsuspecting raven. Sasuke's eyes widened and he quickly took out a kunai to parry them away, but got nicked by a couple of them. "You should keep your eyes on me." He heard a small whisper and whipped his head around, only to meet a fist to his cheek. He rolled backwards and slid to a stop, wiping the mud off his face, and glared at the blonde heatedly. "Oh, come on, Sasuke-chan, you thought I would be taken down that easily? Who do you think you're fighting, one of your fangirls?" he mocked him, and the raven growled in anger. "Damn you," he shouted and threw shurikens himself. Naruto smirked at getting him riled up and flicked out his three-pronged kunais, batting away the flying stars with a practiced elegance. He crouched down as an arm passed above his head harmlessly and crossed his arms in front of him to block the kick that he saw coming. He was launched back a few feet in the mud and let out an oomph when his back collided with a tree harshly. He coughed a wheezing breath and looked at the smirking Uchiha who was running towards him, to hit him with the hilt of the kunai and knock him out. The Uchiha smirked as the blow made contact, though his eyes widened when the blonde disappeared in a puff of smoke. "Substitution," he exclaimed, and felt a foot connect to his back and launch him face first into the same tree he had kicked the blonde in earlier. Naruto jumped up as the raven swiped his feet to make him go down and back flipped a couple of times to gain some distance. "You are good, Sasuke, training hard, I see." Naruto spoke in admiration for his opponent. "You're not bad yourself, Namikaze," Sasuke said in a rare moment of appreciation with a little smile. Both charged forward to the trees in front of them, keeping their eyes on the opponent running along their side, and ran up the trees in opposite directions. Sasuke jumped off and launched another flurry of shurikens that Naruto saw coming a mile away and launched a counter-attack himself. The flying metal met with a clang and fell down harmlessly while Sasuke and Naruto took the tree's jumps to meet for kicks in midair. Both launched backwards and twisted to land on the bark of the tree for a spring jump and jumped back into the fray. Both traded blows, jumping in between the branches, chuckling every now and then at the giddiness they felt in the fight. It didn't matter why they were fighting now, the rain, mud and the pure rush of the battle had now taken over them. Sasuke decided to take it up a notch. Snake Ram Monkey Boar Horse Tiger. Fire Style, Grand Fireball Jutsu, he exclaimed after running through hand seals. Naruto's Sharingan had activated during the last couple of minutes on instincts as he knew which jutsu was coming and prepared the counter for it himself. Tiger Snake Rat Snake Tiger Bird. Water Style, Water Wall, he exclaimed and spouted out water from his mouth to effectively counter the incoming inferno. Both attacks met and a hissed while Sasuke tried to overpower him and pumped in more chakra. Naruto kept going on to defend effectively and was panting under the strain. He hadn't mastered this jutsu yet completely. Both cancelled their jutsu out and fell to their knees in exhaustion. Let's just call it a draw, Naruto said in pants, making Sasuke shake his head in refusal. No, not yet, he answered and stood up on shaky legs. Naruto shook his head and stood up. Both glared at each other, and just as a drop of water dropped from Naruto's nose they were off with their fists cocked back for one final blow. Naruto. Sasuke. Both shouted in unison and launched their attacks. Naruto's fist met Sasuke's cheek and threw him back while Naruto stood on shaky legs and looked at his down opponent. Sasuke was gazing at the raining sky with a small serene smile on his face. He hadn't felt this light and nice ever since the massacre. You and Naruto, just this once, he whispered, making Naruto fall on his butt and lie down right by his side. He crossed his arms behind his head. He was glad that he had picked that defensive jutsu up from the old man. Put a lid on it, I'm exhausted, Naruto said, making Sasuke smirk. He was exhausted himself. He really was the only one who pushed him this far. Naruto's ears perked up when he caught something strange coming from a little afar. What's the matter? Sasuke asked, but Naruto said nothing and just sat up. The raven looked lost as Naruto kept on gazing at a particular spot. Sasuke, I'll see you at the academy, all right, he said, and didn't bother for a reply as he started walking deeper into the forest. The Uchiha just shrugged and went back to his own home to get a change of clothes and something hot to drink. Naruto kept on following the strange sound that was bugging him and was getting into quite a deep part of the forest. Finally, he felt he was near the voice and his eyes widened when he saw a small cub having his leg trapped underneath a boulder and crying for help. He ran forward and saw that it was a small bear cub with completely white fur. Polar bear, he mused and crouched down by his side to see the frightened eyes of the cub land on him. He smiled at the cub for reassurance and scratched the back of his ear, making the cub purr softly and nuzzle in his hand. All right, now let's get you out, he said, and stuck his feet to the slippery ground with chakra and did the same with his hands to catch the boulder. Now he was cursing his earlier spar as he heaved in all his strength and pulled up while the cub mewled in pain and tried to wriggle off from the weight. Come on, you damn rock, he roared in exertion and pumped his muscles full of chakra to lift the huge boulder up, finally enough for the cub to get free. He let the boulder fall with a huge noise and saw the cub trying to lick his injured paw while whimpering in pain. He scooped the cub up in his arms while it just mewled and tried to pry off. Naruto just hugged him and held him gently to calm him down. It'll be all right, we'll get you fixed up in no time, he consoled the cub, who calmed down and curled up in his arms to take in the newfound warmth in the heavy downpour. Naruto jumped up onto a branch and expanded his senses to locate the way out from where he was. He started going through tree after tree at full speed and only now realized how deep he had come in. He reached the fence and jumped up with a single flip over it to the other side. He read the board on his run. Forest of Death. Stupid name, I guess, he muttered to himself and ran off towards the village. He saw the bleeding paw of the cub and ran as fast as he could to get him patched up. Uzumaki Namikaze households. Kushina was preparing for breakfast while humming on her toes. She smiled seeing her daughter come down, who was looking at her expectantly, much to her confusion. Ka-chan, where is Aniki? She asked sleepily, making Kushina even more confused. Naruto. Isn't he in his room? She asked curiously, getting a shake of the head from her daughter. No, I was sleeping there and he wasn't there, looks like he left early to train, she mumbled with a yawn, throwing Kushina in for a loop. It was raining quite heavily as she saw the storm outside and wondered if he was in some other room when she heard the main door being opened. She gasped as her eyes landed on the drenched form of her son who looked like he had been scuba diving in his clothes. "Ka-chan, help him," he said pleadingly while holding out the cub in his arms. She saw the injured cub and nodded with a little smile, taking the adorable thing in her arms. "Come to the bathroom with me, Naruto-chan," she said firmly while he nodded and followed her. She hadn't left any room for questions, that was for sure. He got in the bathroom and yelped as his t-shirt was yanked over his head suddenly. His teeth chattered and he shivered from the cold he felt suddenly. He felt a soft bonk on his head and looked at the stern face of his mother who was holding a highly amused cub in her arms. He glared at the little traitor who just purred as Kushina rubbed his head softly. "Now you see what you get for going out into a storm. What were you doing out anyways?" she asked as she sat him down in the tub and turned on the hot water shower, making him sigh in relief as the hot water sprayed over him. "I went to see Sasuke," he whispered, making her fall silent and rub his hair, which rinsed off the heavy mud he had assimilated. "And how did you get so dirty or come across this little thing?" she asked, pointing to the cub that was trying cutely to get in the warm-looking water but slipping at the slippery tiles. Naruto smiled and picked him to take him in the water and chuckled as the cub dove nose deep in the water and purred happily. "I met Sasuke there and we had a spar, then I thought I heard something in the forest and followed the voice to him stuck beneath a boulder. I freed him and brought him home," he said as the cub latched himself on his shoulders like a little koala and licked his cheek happily, making him giggle happily. Kushina giggled herself while rinsing off the shampoo from his hair. "They give strange names to forests these days, Ka-chan," he mumbled, making her raise an eyebrow as she started lathering the cub in soap, who was mewling happily. "Really?" she asked curiously, and he nodded. "Hi, I found this little thing in a forest called the Forest of Death." "I mean, who names a forest that?" he asked, playing with the cub, not looking at the mortified face of his mother behind him. "You went into the Forest of Death," she whispered, and he muttered a "hi," and he played with the cub in the hot water. Now she could understand how he had gotten across to a polar bear of all things to come across. But she was pretty sure they didn't have those in there, the last she had heard. "Naruto," she spoke firmly in a serious tone, making two pairs of innocent eyes turn to her, and she resisted the urge to yell kawaii and hug the two to death as the cub's chin rested over Naruto's head. "You will not go there again without adult supervision. Am I clear?" she asked, getting a nod but a questioning look from the blonde. "That forest is used by our village to have survival training exercises to be taught to the ANBU Black Ops. The fact that a child, much less an academy student, went in and came out unscathed is shocking to say the least. Even Chunins think twice before going there," she said and sighed as she saw the two playing with bubbles in the tub and completely ignoring her again. "Naruto," she spoke and got two innocent blinks from the two children in the tub. "Hi," he asked innocently, and the cub purred in unison, making her sigh in defeat. "What do you want to do with him?" she asked, pointing to the cub in his arms, and smiled when she saw him wrapping him up in his arms protectively. "I want to keep him. I'll take care of him, and he likes me, see," he asked, and got a lick on his cheek from the cub, making her smile and nod. She had already figured as much. "All right, I'll talk to the Hokage tomorrow since he was found in the Forest of Death. If he agrees, you can keep him, but you'll have to take great care of." She trailed off as she got two wet hugs. One from her son and the other from the cub who had jumped in her arms happily. "Oh, you two are ruining my clothes," she gushed and yelped when she was pulled into the tub abruptly. She saw the laughing form of her son and the cub, who was wagging his little tail happily, and her eyes softened as she too giggled, and a round of water splashing started in the bathroom. A few moments later, a dried-up Naruto sat on the table with the cub sleeping and softly purring on his lap while Mito was stealing glances at the cute little thing. Kushina put down the food on the table and told them all about the new possible member of their family. "Aniki, you should name him," Mito squealed in delight, making Kushina giggle and Naruto smile. "He should name her, since it was a female cub." I guess I'll name her Akira then," he said, and saw the happy-looking cub who mewled and wagged his tail in approval, making Kushina giggle all the more. "I swear she is more of a mixture of a dog and a cat than a polar bear," she giggled, and they all shared a laugh at the cub's expense, who purred happily and snuggled in his new master's embrace. They were all startled when a puff of smoke appeared in the room, and Naruto and his siblings had their kunais drawn while Kushina stood in front of them protectively with her chains now protruding from her back. The smoke cleared to reveal the form of a polar bear that came to about Kushina's shoulders in height and was wearing a golden armor over him. He looked really old, but they were all shocked beyond belief when the bear spoke up. "So that is where you ran off to?" "I had them search the entire lands of polar bears but couldn't find a trace. How she came across a reverse summoning seal is beyond me," the bear said with a tired sigh and blinked as he saw the defensive humans in front of him and came to his surroundings of a house. His eyes then landed on the cub in Naruto's arms, who mewed happily at seeing the old bear. Naruto looked down at the cub in his arms and moved a couple of steps to the new bear as the old bear sniffed and licked the cub, who purred happily. "You're a summon?" Kushina asked, making the old bear look at her and smile slightly with a nod. "Why yes, young lady, I am Irek, the elder of the great polar bear clan. And this little thing belongs to our realms but has wandered off here, Kami knows how," he said, and looked on curiously when Naruto had her in a protective hug. He felt a hand on his shoulder and looked on at the sad smile of his mother. "Naruchan, she's a summoning animal. She will have to be returned." She trailed off when he wriggled off her grip and stood back defiantly. "I don't care. Akira's staying with me, and that's that, even if I have to fight him for it," he said firmly, looking at the old bear with narrowed eyes. Well, well, I rarely ever see such fiery young cubs these days, and I must say he is quite courageous," the bear said while Kushina watched her son glare at the bear heatedly with a little nervousness. The bear must be strong if it was an elder of his clan, since she knew the strongest of the summons were elder summons. She watched the bear take steps towards Naruto and stiffened while Naruto's Sharingan blazed to life and he flared his chakra, doing nothing to faze the bear in the slightest. "Tell me, young cub, why are you so protective of her?" he asked curiously and took another sniff from Naruto, who brushed the cub's hair gently. "I rescues her and she's my responsibility now. She's staying with me and I'm not taking no for an answer," he said in a firm tone, leaving no room for arguments. Kushina watched on with a bitten lip, knowing she could be in for a fight with a strong summon any moment now. Her son really was reckless when he wanted something and he wasn't letting her go. "Very interesting indeed, young one. But I'm afraid we cannot let a cub from our land stay in your world for too long if that person isn't our summoner," he said with a smirk, making Kushina's eyes go wide in shock at his sly suggestion. Naruto, though, wasn't seeing his point and was getting ready to defend himself as he spun his kunai by the ring and held it in front of him. "So how do you want to do it?" he asked defensively, making the bear smirk in amusement. Kushina wanted to beat his head with a broom right now as she face-palmed. "Well, I guess you'll have to become the personal summoner of Akira now. I'll place a special personal summoning seal on your arm which will bond you two for life, and you just need to smear your blood over it to summon her anywhere," he said, making Naruto's eyes go wide in surprise before he grinned foxily and nodded. "Are you making him your summoner?" asked Kushina in a stunned voice while the bear shook his head. "No, we shall see if he is worthy enough or not, and I'll have to talk to the clan before it. We haven't had a single summoner in all our years since we don't trust humans. But seeing as how this little one adores him, we'll see if it could be changed in the future," he said, getting a nod from Kushina. "Hold out your hand, young cub," he said, walking up to Naruto, who looked at his mother and she nodded. He held his left arm out when, much to his shock, the bear bit onto it gently and he winced in pain. He could feel his arm burn and saw a strange black marking spread onto his forearm in the shape of a roaring bear around the place he had bitten onto. "There is your seal, young cub, and we shall see what ties you'll have with my clan in the future, if any. For now you can keep our cub. I hope you'll keep her safe," he asked, getting a nod from Naruto. "Ya count on it," he said, making the bear nod before he puffed out of existence and returned to the summoning realm. Kushina still couldn't believe it. Her son had gone out this morning, saved a cub and become a summoner. He really did have the devil's luck, she mused and smiled as she watched him play with the cub happily. Time skipped 6 years later. Kanahagakure no Sato. Hokage Tower. Hokage Office. It had been 6 long years, and the time for the batch of academy prospects to graduate was upon them. Hiruzen puffed on his pipe, looking at the various files lying in front of him. This was the hardest thing he admitted to doing every year. Selecting genin teams for graduates. A balanced team where each member would be beneficial to the other, how their teamwork would let them come on top of their own individual weaknesses. These teams would be together for years to come and would most likely shape their futures, in short. He sighed. He was getting too old for all this. His eyes darted towards the door that opened. He let out a puff, watching several jounins file in the room. He decided the teams ultimately, but the Jounins did request their subordinates personally or suggested him teams. It was how it had always worked for them. He saw his son straightaway going for 3 files and tossing them in front of him. I request Ino Yamanaka, Shikamaru Nara, and Choji Akimichi for my genin squad, he murmured, puffing on a cigarette himself. Many murmurs ran across the room saying he had picked out the golden squad already. The Ino Shikacho trio, the Hokage murmured deep in thought, and Asuma gave a curt nod. Their fathers had surely been a menace and were the strongest squad the village had when they were active. Maybe he could recreate the success of the previous generation with them. He glanced at his son from underneath his hat and the small smirk plastered on his face. He wanted them badly, and Hiruzen knew he would make fine shinobi out of them. He gave one final puff before nodding and picking up the files. He handed the 3 files to Asuma, who smiled widely. Very well, Ino Yamanaka, Shikamaru Nara and Choji Akimichi will be under the command of Asuma Sarutobi. Study their files carefully and pick them up tomorrow for their test, he barked in his Hokage voice. Asuma nodded, tucking the 3 files under his arm, and watched on the proceedings curiously. Hiruzen watched the newest of all the Jounins, Kurenai Yuhi, stepping forward to the table laden full of prospective candidates' files. She bristled through them one after the other and finally picked 3 out, handing them to the old man. Kiba Inuzuka, Shino Abirame, and Hinata Hyuga, he murmured, glancing and opening the 3 files up. He went into deep thought and glanced at the kunoichi, who was looking at him with a smile. Any particular reasons for these 3? He asked, though saw the potential tracker and retrieval team she was trying to create. Hinata with her Byakugan scouting out enemies, Kiba being the natural tracker with his Inuzuka clan's abilities, and Shino with his insects for capture through a distance or for distractions. I wish to make a tracker team from them, Lord Third, she said politely, getting a nod in return. He had already figured as much. But would the team fit? Kiba, the brash and proud Inuzuka, Shino, the quiet and logically seeing Abirame distanced from everyone else, and Hinata, the shy and compassionate kunoichi who was almost too nice to even think of hurting someone's feelings. He hummed, thinking about granting her the squad of her choice or not. Kiba and Shino might fit, the Inuzuka playing leader with his pride and alpha male personality, and Shino letting him have his space, being the logical one he was. But where did Hinata fit in? She was too quiet and shy for her own good, though had the most potential out of almost all the fresh kunoichis and the revered Byakugan with her. Kurenai saw his apprehension and decided to say something. What wrong, Lord Hokage? She asked nervously, making his serious eyes turn to her. He said nothing and let out a puff of smoke, still in deep thought. All of their thoughts were broken when the door to the chambers opened abruptly and in walked a silver-haired Jounin reading the infamous orange book. He saw all eyes on him. I smiled with his lone visible eye. Well, you see, I thought I saw something shiny in the sky and decided to follow it, thinking it was an alien ship, but in the end it turned out to be a balloon, he said lazily, pulling out a silver balloon from behind him. Hiruzen chuckled wholeheartedly at Kakashi's antics. The man always did have a theme for theatrics when it came to excuses. The other Jounins watched him incredulously with pin-drop silence until Asuma spoke up. That really is shiny, he murmured, getting even more incredulous stares, and shrugged nonchalantly. Kakashi strolled down to the front and Hiruzen watched with narrowed eyes when his best elite Jounin started rummaging through files. All the Jounins were watching intently. Kakashi never wanted a team, so it was a surprise when he himself was actively taking a part in choosing a team for himself. Hiruzen smiled. Maybe he might pass a squad this year, as he watched the man's childlike enthusiasm when he searched for it. Hiruzen saw him go through files but knew it was all an act. The man knew what he wanted but was purposefully wasting his time. But he couldn't say the suspense wasn't exciting. His eyes lingered on Kakashi's hands as he handed him 2 files, and he instantly opened the thread over them and flipped them open. Almost every head in the room leaned in and broke into a fit of murmurs and whispers at seeing who he had picked out. Sasuke Uchiha and Naruto Namikaze. Hiruzen spoke aloud and went into another round of deep thoughts. The 2 top boys of the year and rivals. It was no news to Hiruzen that the 2 would do fine on a team. Sasuke only respected strength, and Naruto was the only boy he knew who kept beating him in each of his challenges with ease. They held a mutual respect for each other and pushed each other further to keep up with the other. The idea seemed quite possible now. He looked up at the lazy Jounin and ignored all the curious stares of the people wondering if he would grant his request of putting the two strongest genins together. "What about the kunoichi of your squad?" he asked, and all eyes rested on Kakashi, who once again looked at the files on the table and frowned. "Ah," he said happily as his eyes rested on the 3 open files underneath his own, and a small picture of indigo hair caught his eye. He smiled and reached for it and threw it with the other 2, making Hiruzen raise an eyebrow. Kurenai's eyes widened in shock as Hiruzen spoke the name of his 3rd requested charge. "Hinata Hyuga," he said, and glanced at Kurenai, who was outright glaring at the lone-eyed man. "I have already requested her for my squad." She bristled angrily, making Kakashi glance at her a bit before looking back at Hiruzen, who was scrutinizing him quite intently. "Oh," he spoke in amusement, causing the glare to intensify, but ignored it. His eyes glanced at the 2 open files from where he had picked it up from. He looked back at Hiruzen, who was now just leaning back in his seat and watching the bickering start in pure curiosity. "Have you approved it then, Sandaime?" the lazy Jounin asked, making Hiruzen smirk ever so slightly before shaking his head in negative. Kakashi's eye turned to the furiously glaring red-eyed Jounin, and he smiled. "Then I guess I could request her. She would be perfect for my squad, Kurenai," he said in his usual lazy voice, making her bristle in anger and glare at him as he tried to break her perfect squad. "No, she would be perfect under my squad and tutelage, Lord Hokage. I will help her sort out her confidence issues, and her Byakugan would be invaluable to my team." "She doesn't fit in Kakashi's ridiculously put-together squad at all," she protested heatedly at the thought of losing the girl she cared so much about. The Hokage hummed and turned his eyes to the lone-eyed Jounin, who was reading his book calmly. "How would Hinata work it out on your squad, Kakashi?" "Kurenai's selections do show merits," he said, giving him a chance. He himself agreed with Kurenai. The girl might become a 3rd wheel and become sidetracked with the 2 heavily strong boys. And her meek and shy nature might put her aside even more and make her an outcast. He would have denied had any other Jounin asked for her with these 2, but since it was Kakashi, he would give the man a chance to point out his reasons. Kurenai smirked and looked at Kakashi, who in a rare occurrence closed his book with a snap and looked at the Hokage seriously. "She will be perfect, Hokage-sama. With Sasuke and Naruto being highly proficient in ninjutsu and taijutsu with mid to close range capabilities, she could become a perfect addition to my team," he said ever so calmly, making Hiruzen raise an eyebrow. "Oh, how so?" he asked curiously and leaned forward with his chin over his crossed fingers. "She is excellent in taijutsu but shows her deep interest to be a medical ninja. She has been creating bombs and healing ointments from a young age and even took some of the healing classes that were given at the academy as her extra skill," he said, and got a small nod from Hiruzen. "A Hyuga, and that too as a medic, would be quite the sight to behold. The combat medics usually weren't trained for combat too much, but a Hyuga could accomplish quite a lot, given their enemies would think twice of charging them head-on, and her Byakugan coupled with healing abilities would make even Tsunade drool at having her as an apprentice, though it would be a cold day in hell when she took on another apprentice." He hummed in thought while Kurenai was suddenly nervous and cursing the silver-haired Jounin. "She wouldn't fit in, Lord Third. Those 2 are leaps and bounds above her in their skills and would think she would just hold them back. She might become an outcast." She was cut off by the nonchalant voice of Kakashi. "She has deep feelings for Naruto and he returns them. He cares a lot for the girl. I don't think being an outcast would be a problem," he said, making her fall silent and curse him even more. Hiruzen took note of the point in favor of Kakashi and was now seriously considering his suggestion and approved the squad. "What about Sasuke then? He would no doubt look down upon her shy and kind nature. His attitude is too dark for her," she argued, making Kakashi smile in that infuriating manner she hated so much. "Sasuke hates one thing more than a shy and kind girl. A fangirl. If you were to take Hinata, I would have to make do with Sakura, who is infatuated with the boy. You, on the other hand, being a kunoichi, might help her break away out of those obsessive natures. Hinata will be fine with me, plus Naruto will make her confidence soar like always," he said, and she gritted her teeth at the losing battle she was fighting. The small smile on Hiruzen's face was proof enough he was considering this suggestion heavily. "Plus, Sakura has perfect chakra control, I might add, and you might have a potential genjutsu mistress in your hands, and she might even pick up a sensory technique to help your squad even more. With Hinata, my heavy assault team will be complete. It's a win-win for the both of us, Kurenai-chan." He chirped happily, and she glared at the way he had called her but said nothing. As much as she loathed to admit it, he did have some good points there. I have made my decision, rang the calm voice of Hiruzen as he closed and handed the 3 files to the smiling Jounin. Kakashi, you have your squad, make them a fine team. They have the greatest potential out of all the squads this year. I place my faith in your hands, he said, and Kakashi nodded, absolutely delighted with a wonderful squad in his hands. Hiruzen handed Kurenai her 2 requested files and added Sakura Haruno's file to it. He would have placed Sasuke with him without a doubt, and Naruto's presence with Kakashi would help in assuring there was always a proficient Sharingan user with him if he ever lost control. Kurenai, your squad too is quite a balanced one if you work with them nicely. I expect quite a lot out of them, he said in his ever-calm tone, and she nodded with a small sad smile. Even if she hadn't gotten the girl she considered a little sister, she had 2 of her choices approved and the 3rd Kunoichi had a potential for genjutsu. Maybe it wasn't so bad. What about the Uzumaki twins? Asked Genma, making Hiruzen nod, already expecting the question for a while now. All eyes sat on him now. Menma and Mito Uzumaki have been put onto a squad and assigned a special sensei after a long discussion between me, Jiraiya and Kushina. You all don't need to worry about it, he said in a tone of finality, and everyone decided to end the topic then and there. They knew the man wasn't in the mood to answer any other questions and they started going through the rest of the files. Meanwhile, at the Konoha Academy, Naruto, dressed in a plain black shirt and black pants, as were all the other students in their final year for their medical evaluations before they graduated tomorrow, was in a silent hallway in the academy. He had some time before the next evaluation and ran his hands softly along the slim waist of the girl he was holding. Hinata, like Naruto, dressed in a black shirt and a thigh-length black skirt while she had her back against the wall and her arms around his neck. She gazed down, not being able to look him in the eyes from the shyness she felt. Naruto brought a finger under her chin and raised her gaze to meet his own. She blushed prettily as her shy and shimmering lavender pearls met those soul-piercing azure blue eyes that held a calm storm in them. Her blush increased when she saw the small confident smirk on his face and she averted her eyes to the side shyly. Her lower lip bitten softly through the left side, making her almost irresistibly cute in his eyes. He leaned down, his own lips brushing against her soft pink ones which opened slightly, and her breath tickled his own lips. Do I scare you, Hin? He asked, making her lick her lip unconsciously as his breath tickled her lips and she puckered them slightly. She knew he was always scared, that he intimidated her in such positions, but she never felt scared of him. She could never feel scared of him. His dominating position made her feel all the more safe in his arms. No, she whispered breathlessly. Her cheeks adorning the pink blush from the way her affectionate nickname that he used when only the 2 of them were there, slipped so smoothly of his lips. Really? He asked in a whisper, making her breath hitch at the proximity and how his hands slid slowly under her shirt and ran along the sides of her waist. Her nervous lavender pearls gazed into those fiery blue eyes she loved so much. Really, she whispered firmly, making him smirk slightly. His lips pressed on her soft pink ones and she too pressed them back. He closed the distance between their bodies by pulling her waist closer and his hands ran underneath her shirt across her back. She let out a soft moan in their lip lock and her arms tightened around his neck. He completely dominated her and kissed her softly yet lovingly on her lips. He broke the kiss off softly, much to her disappointment, but he gave her no time to breath as he kissed her jawline ever so softly again. Her head craned back, giving him complete access, and he attacked her vulnerable neck. Soft butterfly kisses ran along her sensitive skin down to her collarbone. She let out yet another soft moan and ran her fingers through his hair. Those silky blonde locks she loved so much. Her breath hitched slightly when she felt his hands on her stomach making her way up, and she shivered in nervousness. Naru, she said shakily in a moan, making his hands stop and pull out while holding her waist. Her shaky soft voice was enough to make him stop from doing anything she wasn't comfortable with. He put his forehead against hers and gazed into those shy eyes he loved so much. I love you, Hin, he said simply, as if it was truest thing to him in the world. She smiled softly and her cheeks burned red, but she looked back into his eyes with such love it made his own stomach have butterflies. I love you, Naru, she whispered, the words almost rolling off her tongue, and the smile he graced her with made her heart flutter. He only smiled that softly and lovingly when they were in their moments and all alone. His hand brushed her hair tied up in a high ponytail, now coming to her mid-waist. He pulled her face into his neck and she snuggled in his arms quickly. His nose nuzzling her neck and taking in the sweet vanilla scent he loved so much. You smell so lovely, Hin, he whispered, making her blush in embarrassment and hug him tightly. He smiled, feeling her embarrassment clearly rolling off of her. He felt her kiss his neck with her supple lips softly and smiled, holding her soft form in his arms gently. The two had gotten almost inseparable over the years. His 5 feet 4 inches form holding her almost 5 foot form in his arms. His soft teasing and ever-soft gestures had slowly turned into these intimate kisses and positions he sometimes pulled her in, and much to his and her own surprise she never pushed him away. Whenever he asked her why, the answer was the same. "I can never push you away," was what he always got, and it made him smile every time at the faith she held in him. She was still the same shy mess when it came to him, but she had gained a lot of confidence around others. No longer did she stutter with others. Though with him, it was there, albeit only sometimes now. Her body was also starting to develop as she grew. Her chest now B-cups drew the attention of several boys their age, but Northwest one ever got close. His fiery glares were enough to send them on their way. "We should get to class," she whispered, giving his cheek a kiss, and he smiled, feeling it through his sensitive whiskers. "Let me hold you a little longer," he whispered back, hearing footsteps across the next hallway but ignored it. She giggled softly and nuzzled her nose with his softly. "What am I going to do with you?" she asked in her soft melodic voice, and he smiled, cupping her pink cheek in his palm. "Anything you would like to do," he whispered, making her cheeks burn red from his words. He chuckled softly when he felt her hit his chest and mutter "Baka." She broke the hug gently and caught his hand in her own with a small giggle. "Now come on, let's go," she said happily, and he smiled and allowed himself to be dragged along the hallways with the giggling girl. They reached their class while Hinata slid the door open, getting almost all eyes on them. "Gomen Irika sensei, we didn't mean to be late," she said softly with a polite bow. The instructor smiled, though eyed her holding hands with the blonde and nodded. He watched her pull him with her to the back row and went back to his charts of medical evaluations. This had become a common occurrence through the years. At least she kept the lazy blonde a bit in line, and from what he knew their parents were well aware of their close friendship. Kiba watched the Hyuga heiress with a bright smile and that adorable pink blush, holding hands with the Namikaze, and couldn't help but writhe in jealousy. She had caught his attention when she had let her hair grow, and almost all the male population of the academy too had started noticing her rising confidence and skills. She wasn't like the fangirls in the academy. She took her training seriously but had her eyes set on the blonde, who reciprocated her feelings fully. They were the cutest couple in the academy according to the girls. He watched the two bangs framing her face waving and how she giggled softly, pulling Naruto along with her. He too wanted to be friends with her, but it was almost as if she didn't even see him when she was with him. And much to his chagrin, she always seemed to be with him. Menma watched his brother walk beside him and just ignored him, and Naruto didn't let his gaze linger on too long too. Everything had gone wrong just as Mito had feared at the showcase in front of their parents all those years ago, though the circumstances were nowhere near what she had expected. Flashback. All the parents and guardians were standing in the grounds of the academy for the showcase their children were going to give today. Everyone could see the excitement on their faces, even the ever-stoic Hayashi was smiling ever so slightly for seeing his daughter. Naruto sat by Hinata, his arm around her waist, holding her gently with Sasuke sitting on his other side. They watched Irika, who was calling the names of several students. "Hinata Hyuga and Ino Yamanaka," he called out, and Naruto smiled. He gave her a soft squeeze and nuzzled his cheek on her head, making her blush. "Go on and show them, Hina-chan," he whispered in her ear, making her blush slightly and nod. She stepped in the ring with Ino, who had a smug smile on her face. "Ha, I get the shy girl. At least I'll get to show Sasuke-kun how better I am than Billboard Brow over there," she said smugly, ignoring the cry of protest from Sakura. Irika sighed and just waved his hand in front of them. "Hajime," his voice rang out, and Ino dropped into her stance. Her eyes widened when she saw Hinata had rushed her and was almost by her side with her palm going for her stomach. It made contact and Ino felt the wind knocked out of her stomach. She was launched back and out of the ring like a rag doll. Choji poked her softly and shook his head at Irika. She was out cold. "Shosha Hinata Hyuga," he called out, getting an applause from the crowd. Inoichi was rubbing his forehead from the shame he felt not only at the fight but his daughter's attitude. How had he let her become a fangirl? Was what he was asking himself. He was going to have a long talk with his wife if he had anything to say about it. Hayashi was smiling like an idiot and bursting with pride. His daughter had destroyed the Yamanaka heiress in one blow. That was how a Hyuga struck. He glanced to the side when an elbow poked his stomach and saw the bubbly red-headed mother smiling too. "Aren't they adorable?" she squealed softly, making him quite confused. Though he saw Naruto hug his daughter and congratulating her, all the while she was blushing and stuttering her thanks. His lips pursed and he went into deep thought for a moment. Well, he is Minato's son and the Namikaze heir. At least she isn't associating herself with someone not of her own standing, and he is quite skilled too, he thought, and nodded at the Uzumaki clan head curtly. Yes, they do make quite a sight to behold, he said stoically, making Kushina smile. She was happy that Naruto was friends with Hinata and from what it looked like Sasuke too, as she saw him put the boy in a headlock much to his protests. "Menma Uzumaki and Sasuke Uchiha," called out Irika, drawing her attention towards the ring, and she smiled seeing her son enter the ring. Menma was grinning. This was perfect. Sasuke was the best after his brother in all the academy, and he could show everyone how much he had grown. Sasuke though entered with his usual stoic expression and entered the Uchiha clan's interceptor fists taijutsu stance. "Today I'll show everyone I am the best," exclaimed Menma, getting cheers from many girls, and Sasuke just smirked at the challenge. "Let's see if you are anything like Naruto. This might be fun," he said with a smirk, making Menma's smile turn down, and he fell into his own Uzumaki taijutsu stance. "Hajime," rang the voice of Irika, and Menma was off in an instant with a right hook to knock Sasuke out cold. Sasuke brought his arm up and blocked the swing, punching the redhead in his gut and launched him back. Menma skid backwards and coughed, feeling the rock-hard punch he had just endured, and glared at the Uchiha. Sasuke took the initiative and jumped up, twisting himself for a roundhouse kick which Menma ducked under. He flipped in mid-air and brought his other heel down, making Menma slide back to avoid it barely. Sasuke though didn't let up the push and swiped his leg in a horizontal arc along the ground to take his feet from underneath him. Menma tried to jump up but was met with an elbow to his chest and thrown backwards in free fall. He watched down in a wheezing cough, holding his gut where he had been stuck to see the ring's rope, and his eyes widened as he saw the Uchiha stand up, looking down at him. "Shosha Sasuke Uchiha." Irika's voice rang out, and the stunned silence of the crowd was broken by Sasuke's fangirls who cheered for him. "HN. This was disappointing. You are nowhere near Namikaze. Guess there really is nothing alike about you and him, even your surnames are different." "This was a waste of time," he said in annoyance, and walked back to his seat to a slightly frowning Naruto. Menma clutched the dirt in his fist and clenched his eyes in agony, giving a hateful glare towards Sasuke and Naruto, who was sitting beside him. He felt like a joke in front of everyone and walked back to let the matches continue. His mother looked at him with a small sad smile and nodded for confidence, and he nodded back to assure her it was all right. "You didn't have to say that, Uchiha," Naruto said, making Sasuke huff. "It was the truth. He is nowhere near your or my level for that matter. I won't mince my words just to make him feel better. He's weak, and that's the truth," he said in an irritated tone, making Naruto sigh. It was true that Sasuke never minced his words, no matter how cruel they may sound to everyone, but as he saw the sad expression on Mito's face, he sighed. There was nothing he could do now. He heard his name being called out along with Kiba and decided not to prolong it. He wasn't in the mood to play around. His eyes turned to Tobirama, who was sitting on the edge of the roof. The white-haired man nodded, and he nodded back with a smile. "How I'll wipe the floor with you, Naruto," exclaimed the boisterous Inuzuka, and he said nothing, just stood in his stance. The spar was short, and he absolutely destroyed Kiba and threw him out the ring quite pathetically without even breaking a sweat. "That my Naruto-chan?" Kushina chirped happily, making him blush a bit and rub his neck in embarrassment. It served to egg her on even more, and she embarrassed him further. Menma watched his mother cheer for him in jealousy when he was the one who wanted to be in his place. He glared at him heatedly, but the blonde was oblivious to it all and sat back with Hinata and Sasuke bumping his fists with the Uchiha. End of flashback. That was when the rift had formed in their relationship, and Menma started ignoring him and training harder than ever. He had maintained his place at the top of the academy quite easily. He sat down by the window, and Hinata sat beside him, glancing at him every now and then and blushing when she saw his cheek on his palm while he was staring at her. She nudged his shoulder to stop his staring, but caught her hand with his own free hand, making her look at him innocently with a blush. He brought her hand to his face and pressed his lips on the back of it, making her turn crimson. She pulled it back and slapped her hands on her cheeks while looking at her lap. He chuckled and ran his finger on her arm softly, making her squirm from his teasing touch. "No need to be embarrassed, Hina-chan," he said softly, making her smile softly herself, but it didn't do anything to make her redness go away. She caught his hand and entwined her fingers with his own to stop him. He gave it a squeeze, feeling her small hand in his strong grip, and she tried to concentrate on Irika and look into those intense azure eyes. "All right, you all can go. Tomorrow you will be here for your graduation exams and team placements," rang the voice of Irika as he stepped out, and everyone broke down in a chatter. Naruto saw her nervous eyes and pulled her closer by her slim waist. She eeped softly, much to his amusement, but he put her head on his shoulder and she sighed tiredly. "What's the matter, Hin?" he asked in a whisper only audible to her, and she smiled. He could always tell whenever she was troubled. "I want to be in the same team as you," she said, looking at him, and he smiled and nodded. He tucked a loose lock behind her ear, making her shy away cutely, and rubbed her cheek affectionately. "We will be, just you see," he said firmly, making her smile. He was so confident. She could feel as if she could take on the world if her was by her side. "What if we aren't?" she asked sadly, looking at her lap with a bitten lip. His finger rose her chin and he kissed her cheek, making her blush prettily and look at him innocently. "Even then we'll be together. Forever, remember?" he asked, and she nodded with a soft smile. "Forever," she whispered back as they stood up and walked back to their homes to get some rest for their next day.